Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe, that's Ronaldo, that is Mark Critchley from The Athletic, and this is the Paddock Podcast.
Yeah, that's sorry.
What are you playing?
It was actually playing your thing because.
Oh, was it?
I'm so in tune to what happens on Stretford Paddock. Like, it comes on under my crotch.
You've got us playing out of your subwoofer.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking. Obviously, we've got Mark here, so we're going to be going through some of the recent Athletic articles. A little bit on this meeting in Switzerland that took place in the sort of United HQ top boffins, whatever you want to call them. A little bit on sort of Ruben Amorim, and also we're going to talk about this article that came out today that seems to have taken sort of the world by storm, doesn't it, Mark? First of all, though, how are you?
I was fine until this article came out, honestly. I got a text off Jay on Friday, like, do you want to come on the pod Monday? I was like, yeah, sure, nothing's going on Monday. Supposed to have the week off, actually. That'll be fine. Now I feel like I've walked into a fight in a pub car park.
Pretty chill day for you. So I'm going to read the title of the article.
You've gone in to split a fight up and then a punch hits you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what's happened. I'm going to read the title of this article and we'll go into sort of why it seems to have, well, let's just say captured people's imaginations, whether that be good or bad. So the title is The Athletic Survey from Best and Worst Deals. The Athletic's Agent Survey from Best and Worst Deals to Selecting Champions and Relegation Candidates. So you've interviewed, or you, The Athletic, with you as part of it, have interviewed a number of football agents and asked them a series of questions. 20 is the number to be specific. Largely to do with Premier League transfers. Give us the sort of background on how this sort of story came about and you know, your involvement in it, and then we'll get into why it's kind of sort of, you know, I wouldn't say gone viral, but like Ronaldo said before, live, the tweet specifically with the Sesko bit that we'll get into has got 2 million views on Twitter at the moment.
Brilliant. That's really reassuring, calming, and no anxiety inducing. So, no, it's actually an article. It's a piece that we've done consistently for a few years now. I think the first one was going back to about 2021, I think, before I was at the company at least. But I think it's a worthwhile little insight into what people within the football industry think of how, we usually do it soon after the transfer window. Just opinions on who had the best deal, what, themes that are running throughout the transfer window. So there's questions in there about PSR, questions in there about other elements and things, player power, I think, was one. And who's had a good window and who's not, and which are the best signings and which aren't, and who's going to finish as champions, who's in the top four, who gets relegated, that sort of thing. So I think it's useful because, these are people on the inside of the industry. They can be quite difficult to get hold of and to get to set aside the time because they're very busy people, especially during the window. But I think in the past, I've not worked on them before, but I asked a couple of questions for this one. I think in the past it's a useful exercise just to get an idea of what people are thinking and what the chat is inside the industry.
So obviously the bit that's really kind of got people get excited is this question of worst signings. And obviously I guess, how did that work? So did each agent get a single vote as who they thought, or did they do a top 3 worst, or did they do...
No, it's just a question like who's what's the worst signing, I guess, and then they give their answer and they give one. Maybe you're allowed a bit of scope, so like it wasn't like just give one answer. They could expand on the answer and give some reasoning to make it an actual readable article.
I think it said some of them could give 2 as well.
I think when I was speaking to people, sometimes they just said this guy, but maybe this or whatever. They just gave nuanced answers. You know what I mean? So there wasn't
normal
any strict rules,
kind of human answers.
Yeah, exactly.
With it being agents, is there any? Because that's what you're always gonna. I was gonna preface it by saying, agents are inside. They're inside football. They're inside the industry. They actually are people that are professionals in terms of they have a knowledge that we usually don't of the market, and things. So that's why obviously you do it with them, because their opinions.
What's happening? They know about things that haven't been out there. For example.
Exactly. So that's what I was thinking. They also might know certain things about the deals that might not be necessarily public information. But I don't know whether it is. I wonder if any of the agents are if there's any conflicts of interest with the people that they picked. I don't know if they might be. These might be clients or maybe not, but I think it's riled a lot of people up, I guess. Do you know what I mean?
So the thing that's wound people up, because we haven't actually said it yet, is on this question of who do you think the worst sign of the window will be, 6 agents, which is, just for sort of transparency, the number one or worst got 6 votes, the second got 3, and all the rest got 1. Yeah, 6 went to Benjamin Sesko.
Right.
So he was considered by 6 of these agents to be the worst signing of the summer.
Okay.
Some of the comments on him, I'll just read the little snippet. Ultimately, though, it was Benjamin Sesko's £73 million deal to Manchester United from RB Leipzig that drew the most criticism. Way, in quotes, too much money and too soon. They were pressured into making the signing, claimed another, and a lot of money for not much pedigree was the view of a third. So obviously, because of that, I think obviously United he scored 2 goals in his last 2 games, which is more than many United strikers have done in the last 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
And obviously, I think the likes of James Trafford to City, someone who's already been replaced in the same window he was bought in. Jadon Sancho to Aston Villa is another one on this list. Again, it's kind of, we see stuff as United fans that we don't like.
Yeah.
And we have to tell everyone how much we hate it and how ridiculous it is. Obviously, this isn't your view necessarily, although I don't know what your view is.
It isn't my view, no. But
this is the view of football agents. And I think it is a good point that you made before as well, because I know that, I'm not defending you on your behalf here, but I did see some criticism of the style of the article, saying that it wasn't very athletic-y, it wasn't something that you would do, it's chasing kind of, X, Y, and Z, clicks, and this, that, and the other. This is an article and a style that you've been doing for many years now, isn't it? As you said before, this isn't, you've not just decided to do this so Benjamin Sesko could get a kick in, although that kind of has what's happened in the end. But this is a theme and a style that you've done before.
It's not something that's been done because everyone knows that United fans are the easiest to wind up.
No, and I think, to be fair, of all the stuff, I've seen a lot, there's obviously been a lot of criticism of the article itself, and as you say, the way it's done, not just the findings in it. What I would say is, I think that's all, whatever, fair enough. If you disagree with the opinion, you're absolutely within your right to do so, and I disagree with it myself. It's not the Athletic's opinion, it's the opinion of these agents anyway. But one thing I would say is that we've always done it for several years now. It isn't, I've seen some people say, the only reason this has been published is because United players finished top of this list, and that's going to get a lot of clicks and stuff like that. That isn't the case. Like I say, we've done it for several years now. I think 2023 we did it, and the player that was the most surprising signing or the worst signing or whatever the equivalent was Cole Palmer. So that's how much you need to read into it. Who was probably by the end of the year Young Player of the Year. He was Young Player of the Year and probably the best signing that anyone had. So I wouldn't read too much into it. I think even before we'd had Ben White at Arsenal, who's pretty good signing for Arsenal in the end, right? One thing is that Sesko was a lot of money, and I think transfers that are a lot of money, that are that high profile, they stick out in people's heads as well. That's something to remember, recency bias, that sort of thing. If you're asking people as soon as a window is closed, well, what's the best or worst signing of the window? I think I had to do something myself similar for a Dutch magazine or something asked me about it. Now I remember. I was just going through the list, ranked by money spent on the signings and being like, oh yeah, that happened, and then picking them, because you remember the ones that make the biggest splash, don't you? So I think there's an element of that in there as well. Like I say, I don't share the same opinion as these agents. I think even before his 2 goals recently, you could see that he was fitting into this team and that United were perhaps adapting their style of play towards him and figuring out how best to play to his strengths. And I think that's been a notable trend over the last few weeks. He's looked good in my opinion. So I think the fact that these agents had this opinion is a little bit harsh on Sesko. But yeah, I understand why people have kicked off, to be honest.
Because it's also quite a substantial lead for Sesko, isn't it? He's got double the second most.
That surprised me.
6 times all the rest.
That really surprised me.
That's the thing. What do you make of just obviously it's agents,
That's the biggest one. If it was like he was on the list and it was pretty marginal, I think it's the fact that he had 6 votes.
Sure.
The only other person that had more than one was James Trafford from Manchester City. It kind of just it sticks in the core of a United fan a little bit more. And I 100% disagree, and that's not even just United bias. I just don't think he's definitely the worst deal of the summer, and definitely not by the almost distance it's been perceived that way between him and other deals. Especially when I've seen even on the best signings list, there's a couple there where I'm like, we'll see about that one.
Well, I think Donnarumma was top, right? And again, personally speaking, not in total agreement with these agents. I wouldn't necessarily say that was the best signing of the summer because it's a lot of money. I think a good signing is one where you uncover, somebody that wasn't really being looked at, that you don't pay a lot of money for. He turns out to be value, tenfold of that amount. But you only really learn that after more than 7 games, if we're totally honest, don't you? So it's hard to call it at this stage.
When with Donnarumma, you look at the face of it and say 26 million for Donnarumma, who's world-class keeper at PSG, seems like it's a bit of a bargain, and probably that's why they've done it. But it's also a fact of he can be good. I think PSG fans did laud him a little bit as someone that was capable of a bit of a bozo mistake every now and again. I think they had a little bit of a nickname for him in French, but I can't remember it, of just him being a little bit mistake prone. But with it being a Manchester City deal, obviously, allegedly, you just don't know really what the ins and outs of the finances of that deal as well, especially when you don't know how much he's actually going to be on in terms of his wages. I don't know if they equate that into the dealings. I think his wages.
I think it's a lot. A lot. We can safely say that it's a lot of money.
And don't City get better face value transfer fees sometimes because they're more likely than other teams to pay the whole transfer fee straight up?
I'm not sure.
I mean, rather than
if they're able, clubs that are able to do that, it's definitely a plus in negotiations. So if you're able to do that,
I think some of these as well in there that you see, you've obviously got Victor Gyökeres, I think, who was ranked 3rd in terms of the best deals.
Yeah,
he's someone that has been constantly compared to Sesko, because they're both United targets and Arsenal targets.
Yeah.
To what degree, who knows?
Sure.
I think Gyökeres has scored 3 goals. Sesko has scored 2 goals. So far this season, Gyökeres playing for the team playing much higher up in the league. I think he's one where people look at him and go, hang on a sec, he's technically maybe not where he should be. But again, this is just the opinion of 20 people who work in football. That's all this is. But obviously it gets people excited, doesn't it? Do you feel uncomfortable with it?
I don't feel uncomfortable with it at all. I feel like I feel like Matt Hancock come on to like the daily morning rounds where I've got defender policy that I don't have nothing to do with.
Yeah, it's just exploded out of nowhere, and all of a sudden,
exactly,
your pre-scheduled meeting is now absolutely pressing down. Not that this is that, but yeah.
No, I don't feel uncomfortable with it. I think, look, again, it's an article that we do quite regularly, and I'm like a politician just saying the same lines over again.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
But I think, look, people have said, is 20 people enough for an opinion as well? And I can sort of see that side of things, but when I've looked at our articles in the past, it's generally been 20 that we do. And also, you could try as many people as you want, and would it be more representative then? Maybe, yeah, but like I still feel like they're interesting results. They aren't like down in it's not like written in stone that he's definitely the worst signing. Look, these 20 agents.
And also with journalism and just things generally, we're used to seeing, like on social media in journalism, the opinions of one person written or spoken very sort of strongly. Obviously we're here as 2 people, 3 people, and we say our opinions as though they're gospel, and that's what journalism has been, that's what social media is. So 20 is actually a pretty wide spread compared to what you would normally get on any sort of channel or outlet. Martin R in the comments says, I feel for Mark, awkward position for him to be in, but he's a top writer, and props to him for showing up.
We have to say it wasn't him that.
Do you want to know as well?
He's not an agent. He didn't do the answers.
The honest truth in the comments, people get it. I think it's not some absolute.
No, like I said before though, I think if people are angry about it, cool, fine. I think they've got every right to be. I don't agree with it. I'm absolutely fine with that. I just so I don't want to come on here and be like really defensive, because I'm not defensive about it. I also don't. I think it's a worthwhile article to do. It's an insight. It's just a insight. It's not the insight. It's not. Written down.
It's some people's opinion about the transfer window. Fair enough. Akash K with a super chat says, question for Mark, does FSG own a stake in the Athletic?
Not aware of that.
Not that we're aware of.
It's everyone knows I'm not going to be happy with the Gyökeres one.
Yeah. Well, go on then. Obviously, who do you think who's
the worst?
The best and worst transfers?
The worst deal at the moment looks like you could have a choice between both the Scouser ones.
What, obviously Wirtz
Isak and Wirtz, which is a mad thing to say because of obviously the calibre and quality of both players. Well, we know the quality of Isak. Wirtz has been a quality player, but it was a bit of an unknown commodity coming to the Premier League with his play style and the tempo of the league that he's playing in, and he seemingly struggled the first 9 games. I don't know how that can't be up there as the worst deal when you equate it to the value, because he's got no goals, no assists so far. He's not really had a good game to speak of. And he was bought for what was it a Premier League record fee? Before
for the 2 weeks
before Isak.
Yeah,
that has to be if you're talking about it relatively or just with any sense of the word, how can that be seen by such a distance anyway a better deal than Benjamin Sesko is? I just don't see. It's much to do with Sesko being getting 6 votes being the worst, but it's how little scrutiny that's been thrown the way of the Isak and Wirtz deal for me. That is
the surprising thing about Wirtz is that I think a lot of people would have expected him to come and put up the same numbers that he put up in the Bundesliga, but he's looked a lot, like quite far below the physical level of the league. I think that was really surprising to me, and that is something that you can't change easily. You know, if it was a technical problem, then you'd expect him to maybe get better or get more used to it and adapted. And you might still, but he's not gonna put on like £30 overnight. It's not in the right way, is it?
It's difficult, isn't it? But we've seen that a lot with Bundesliga, haven't we?
Yeah. So I get that. I get that maybe Wirtz should come under a little bit more scrutiny. There was one that was mentioned in the article, was Johan Visser, which still to me feels like one that's gone under the radar. If I was picking one, I think he's a good player. I think he had a great season for Brentford last year. But the circumstances of that, wasn't it like 60 mil? I think he had a year left. He's come injured.
29.
He stayed injured.
He's
He's
wild,
29.
Actually. It's a mad signing.
That one to me is by far and away, when we look back, and this is the problem, like this is sort of a post-window survey. I know it's come out a bit later than that. You really only get to judge transfer windows by the end of the season, but that is one that stuck out to me during the summer and still now. I mean, I think he's not played yet, and they've now delayed his return even beyond November, right? Haven't they?
Yeah.
Come on,
and he was free next summer.
He would. I think he had the +1 in his contract, like United players do. But you know, he was blacking out his Instagram, wasn't he, and everything. He was like basically going on strike. So I think that any chance of him that being triggered wasn't that high, was it? So yeah, essentially free next summer.
That's pretty crazy, isn't it?
I think Alanga's escaped the list as well. Hasn't he not?
Yeah.
55 million. I believe he has no goals or assists for Newcastle so far as well, which was seen as a bit of an overpay at the time anyway, when people thought he had a decent season for Forest, but in terms of his ability, especially us United fans, thought it was a bit much. We're obviously happy about it because we got the sell-on fee.
Sure.
But
Newcastle
I don't know.
had a difficult window, didn't they? They had to buy. They were in a really difficult situation with under pressure for not getting business done and not being able to keep hold of Isak, and that puts you in difficult positions and make rash decisions.
Was Waltmade more expensive than Sesko? Because Waltmade's actually done all right so far in it. So I think
he's about the same. They're both about 80 to 85 million euros.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's looked pretty good, especially that penalty was nice, isn't it, into the roof of the net.
How many of them are you actually going to score though? When you go right at the top,
it's a great penalty, but also it's a penalty.
Yeah.
It's good. You get credit for it, but I'm not like, oh my god, what a player! He put a penalty near the top of the goal. Harry Maguire can do that. He's not the best striker in the league. Who do you think has been one of the best, or not one of the best? Obviously, not who has been one of the best. Who do you think will prove to be one of the best?
Benjamin Sesko.
Yes, that's what
Well done.
Thank you.
He's done it.
Oh, he's trying to worm his way back down.
Fantastic. No, I think that's spot on. You're spot on.
I really liked Mbumo. I think. Yeah. It's tough especially when you cover United really deeply. I find I struggle to sometimes keep tabs on everything else going across the league. But from United's perspective, I think Mbumo's been the best. I think it was still maybe a little too much of a transfer fees quite high. Let's face it. I think the same for Cunha as well and Sesko. But just in the way that he's got he seems to be able to hurt opponents in different ways. Mbumo, I think he's brought a real different element of variation to United's attack, and I think that I've never really had any questions about that signing. I think it's looked good so far. He could have a few more goals and assists, sure, but I think by the end of the season he's going to be a key part of United's team for several years to come. I think you can say that pretty confidently about him. Sesko as well, to be honest. I think, like I was saying before, I think the way that United have sort of adapted their play, going longer, getting in those flick-ons on for Mbumo, it's all just coming together, and so I think the business is good from that perspective. Around the rest of the league, I'm trying to think, not sure.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on the Mbumo one. I think so far he just brings something completely different, and especially when we've had such a trend over the last 5 or 6 years with the likes of Anthony, Rashford, who is a much the best version of what I'm about to say, Garnacho, even Sancho to a degree, but certainly those three, they're such run at the defender and we'll see what happens players. I'm going to cut inside and do my thing. I'm going to cut in and have a shot. And Burmo feels like the opposite to those guys. He's like this sort of, considered, composed, controlled version of a winger. And it's so good to see someone playing with a real sort of intelligence on the ball, especially Garnacho. And at times you just think, what did you think was going to happen when you started that run or when you knocked it past that man? I feel like Burmo's just sort of sees everything and slows the game down a little bit. I think that's really good. Who would you say has been the signing of the summer?
I think I always thought Mbeumo was a great deal. He's a player that I've loved for a while, but I think there's quite a few that I've looked decent. I think was Kudus on the good signings part, because I think he
get it up
because I think Kudus has been decent for Tottenham. I know he only recently got his first goal.
You're a fan of his?
I was a fan of him, but I think he's
not on the list now.
I think he's Premier League assist leader.
4.
Been one of their better players.
Grealish
and scored. I think Grealish probably has a shout.
Yeah.
I think Malik Thiaw that was on there has been good for Newcastle for the fee that he was. Obviously, I'm going to be biased and say Mbeumo. I think Mascara for Arsenal for 17 million might end up being a serious steal.
I think that was a weird one, wasn't it? Because he was rated like so highly, and then all of a sudden they've got him for like the sort of money we spend on.
There's people that know youngsters and how much young. Because I remember Finn telling me ages ago that he thought Mascara to Arsenal before he played. When he saw the deal, he thought that was an incredible deal. Yeah, because he was a fan of him.
João Pedro was one that got mentioned to me when we were doing this actually, and I think he's, he had a quick start, didn't he? I don't think he's quite.
He's burnt out recently, but I think I'm a massive fan of João Pedro. I think he's a baller. I think he's quality. I think he's one of them players though. You can look at stats. I know he started well with his goals and assists, and then I think he's probably not had one in the last 5 games or so. But he's one of them players that you watch, his performance makes up for it. He performs well. I think every time I watch shows, he looks like one of their best, probably their best player. Even against us when they had 10 men, I thought he was quality. He was almost like a one-man army, almost, João Pedro. I think he's quality, and he was actually one of the players I wanted United to sign, because he's also got a little bit of edge and tenacity about him, that little bit of nastiness about him. That I think if the fact that the Delap got injured might have not helped him, because I think he likes playing. He's had to play as an out-and-out 9 for them, which he can do, but he'd prefer to be like a little bit deeper. But I think João Pedro's a good shout as well.
Absolutely. Let's move on a little bit then. You've handled that incredibly well, Mark. Not that was, we weren't trying to.
There's nothing to handle.
Trick you or
storm in a teacup.
Yeah, it is really. It's quite fun though. That tells you that it's international break as well, doesn't it?
No, it's the perfect thing for international break though, because people are bored. It's like, do you remember when we had Barclaysman? That was fun. Everyone was just like chatting about watching Stelios Giannakopoulos stuff. Can we just go back to that?
The last international break was very much the Graham Potter international break, wasn't
that was good.
Where he was getting photoshopped onto everything, had to answer questions about it to look an idiot, and then was sacked before the game he did a press conference for. That was harsh timing, that. Not that we need to go into that, but yeah, this international break is the Sesko international break. Let's talk about this other sort of stuff then. So we've got this meeting in Switzerland between we'll get into that. Between Jim Ratcliffe, the Glazers, others. I like that. I don't know if it's a Ratcliffe thing, if it's a United thing, but we had the meeting in Iceland before. Now we've got a meeting in Switzerland. What is it with sort of frosty, kind of James Bond style meetings that Jim Ratcliffe like to conduct?
That's what billionaires do, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like some alpine retreat.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's where else? Monaco? That's not that frosty, is it?
No, that's not frosty at all.
That's not frosty.
I'm just imagining Jim Ratcliffe dressed. Do you know that picture of Ned Flanders in the ski gear?
Sexy Flanders thing.
Yeah.
Why would you want to put that in anyone's head?
I wasn't going to say sexy. I was just going to say.
That's literally the joke.
That is the joke. But that's what I'm imagining in my head. I want to get it out now. But talk to me about this meeting and we'll
I've just got Jim Ratcliffe in like spandex. Okay. Talk to you about the meeting. Well, look, it's an Exco meeting, executive committee. United hold these regularly. International breaks is a time when you usually get them as well, but I think they're usually monthly. It's basically where all the head honchos, all the big swingers at United get together and like discuss the state of the nation and what's going on at the club. In the past, they've been, whenever we get wind of one or whenever we think one might be happening, we're always like, oh, it's Exco, because sometimes, especially over the international break, they might lose a game going into it, and then it's like, what are they going to do about the manager? And you might remember, I think it was this time last year, was it they had the Villa game and it was 0-0, Ten Hag, and then it was the international break right after that, and then there was this whole meeting down in London. I think they had it last year at the Ineos headquarters, where they were discussing Ten Hag's future, and everybody felt like that was going to be the point where they were going to make a decision on it. In the end, he got the Brentford game, which was immediately after, but I think we learned afterwards that some decisions were made at that point in time. So there's obvious parallels there now with that situation, although I don't get the same sense at the minute. And you had Ratcliffe's comments last week. It was an interesting time for them to come out where he's given his back into Ruben Amorim, saying he can only be judged over 3 years. And I think that's consistent with everything that we've heard recently. So in the sense that it was one of the quieter excos, like I say, sometimes we go into these meetings and think, well, there's going to be some huge decisions made, or something on the manager. I don't think that was necessarily the case this time, because things are slightly more sedate after beating Sunderland.
So there was obviously this tweet. I guess that's sort of the extent of it, but it seemed to be a little bit more than that, of some chat about a takeover or an investor or a partner or something. Mm-hmm. It was coming out of Saudi Arabia, and I think I forget his name, Turki Al Sheikh, who's the sort of, I don't know his official title, but he's very much involved in Saudi sport, boxing in particular. He's been kind of the face of this, Riyadh season, this rejuvenated kind of boxing, I guess, world.
Is it Your Excellency?
Potentially. He tweeted about he was happy that United are finally getting this new investor, this new kind of owner. United will be sold, or And then he sort of clarified, saying that I'm not necessarily talking about a full takeover, or they're not from Saudi. What was your understanding of that, and how did it relate to the conversations that were taking place in Switzerland? Was that on the agenda? Has Jim Ratcliffe been kind of the rug pulled from him, or is this just sort of not a lot from a couple of tweets? I
think people got a little bit out over their skis on it. I wouldn't read too much into it just yet, because clearly if anything's happening, it must be at a very preliminary stage, I think. Okay. Not to say that anything is happening. I think that the significance of last week was that really it brought focus on Ratcliffe's position, and I mean his position as though contractually within the agreement that he's got with the Glazers, what can happen? Could he just be bought out? I think that is something that perhaps hadn't always been given that much due attention, and I think people are starting to look at that now, not only because you also had it come with his interview with the Times on the business podcast last week, where he's talking about how he's not going to be overruled on the decision over Ruben Amorim. Now that's interesting of itself, because while we know that when Ratcliffe struck this deal he got control of sporting operations at United, does he have total control? That's still quite an open question, I think, and I think it brought up some interesting points that we can kind of dig into. I mean, so there's these drag-along rights. You might have heard about these, right? And just stop me if it's getting a bit too technical.
No, let's go for it. We've got time.
Give me the text.
So these drag-along rights, they're essentially like a clause within the contract that means that Ratcliffe can be forced into any 100% full sale of the club if the Glazers want to go along with it. It's pretty standard, given that he's a minority shareholder. If you've got a majority shareholder who wants to sell the company, they're within their rights to do that and force the minority shareholders to come along with them. Why it's relevant is because for the first 18 months of Ratcliffe being in the building, the Glazers couldn't do that. He was protected against them doing that. Right. The 18th month deadline, anniversary, whatever you want to call it, passed in August. So now Ratcliffe is vulnerable, if you like, to the Glazers shaking hands with somebody and saying, we want to do a deal for the full 100% sale of the club. If somebody was to do that deal, they would need to pay Ratcliffe £33 for every share that he's got, which I think when you add it all up, totals the club at about 5.78 billion, something like that. Okay. So if we're talking about a sale on that on those numbers, it needs to be for that much at the minute, and that applies for the next 18 months since the August 18 months, so until February 2027. So he could be forced out of the club in that time, but someone's going to have to pay a lot of money, and more money than the same valuation as Ratcliffe paid. He'd get all his money back from the shares that he had in the club.
Do you have any kind of understanding on the willingness of the Glazers to do this, because ultimately this is their decision, but also the willingness for Ratcliffe to do this? Because obviously, just making his money back, having not really got the ball rolling fully yet on the rebuild, wouldn't be ideal for him. But do you get any indication that Jim Ratcliffe is thinking, actually, I've had way more criticism than I've ever had.
Yeah.
We're 18 months in and we're worse than, this is the worst Man United that we've ever had, or certainly in the last 50 years. Maybe I wouldn't mind getting 33 quid per share for my 27.7%.
He gave an interview with the Times back in March, remember when he was talking about the new stadium, and he was doing a round of speaking to a few broadcasters and stuff. He gave an interview there where he was it was the first sort of indication where he was thinking, well, what have I got myself into? That being said, I think there's only one reason why you do this deal, and I've just tried to spell out the parameters of the deal that he's done there. It's not a very advantageous deal for Jim Ratcliffe.
Okay.
You only do that deal if you want to see it through. He's done this because he wants to build United into being the biggest, most successful club in the world again, and he wants that to be his legacy. That's why he's talking about 21st league titles by 2028 or whatever, or 100,000 seater stadiums by 2030. He's literally invested into this project, and so to turn around after just 18 months and say, no thanks, I'll just take my money back, I would be hugely surprised if he was seriously considering that. So I don't get any indication really from Ratcliffe's side that he would entertain that. The point is, it's not really his to entertain, it's not his decision. If the Glazers wanted to do it and somebody offered that money, then he'd have to go along with it. Do the Glazers want to do it? That is like the $5.6 billion question, right? I think people have never really got the sense that, certainly at this present moment, that they would sell. But then if you go back through the documents of the last process, when Qatar were at the table, this is all spelled out on the New York Stock Exchange, Securities and Exchange Commission, etc. When Qatar came to the table and they were putting all these bids in that were getting rejected, at one point they said, okay, well, what price do you want? And Rain, who were the investment bank who were dealing with the Glazers and representing the Glazers at the time, they said $35.25 a share is something that they would consider. So that was them saying, this is our price for a full sale, basically. So we do know that they would consider a full sale. They have considered it in the past, at least. And when they announced the whole strategic process to look into it, they said the options will include a full sale. So it's not like it's completely off the table, but is that truly their intention? I remember during that process, people were always saying they think that, there's still, that valuation could still go higher, that there's still, more potential to this than had previously been realised. Yes, and look, the club is now probably in a much better financial position than it was those 18 months ago because of the changes that Ratcliffe has had to kind of be the human shield for in front and centre. The club is now potentially a more investable asset. So I think it's, like I say, it's a question that there's not a lot of answers to at this stage. I would assume that Ratcliffe really would not wish to be pushed out, but he doesn't have that much of a choice in it if it was to happen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think as United fans, 99% of us, probably 100% to be honest, would like to see the back of the Glazers and a full sale eventually. But there's also a large part of the fan base that have this kind of almost cringing element towards the possibility of it being like Saudi backed or a Middle Eastern buyer, which is a bit of an issue because with how the United's valuation in terms of it being a full sale, it does feel like it does almost like push towards that part of the world and being the only ones that could really afford it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So then it's like, what way out does United really have? Because I'm desperate, obviously, to see the back of Glazers. It's just people want it to be done a certain way. Some people don't mind. There's always going to be a split and a dividing opinion. But with the valuation that United have, which is probably what the as far as franchises go, I know the Dallas Cowboys are probably up there. They might be viewed as number one in terms of.
They always seem to be at the top end of the Cowboys.
Yeah, how much they'll cost? It's just like who could really afford it. I don't know all the billionaires. There might be billionaires out there that can, but it just depends on.
It'd be that. It would be someone like Chelsea was a huge sale, wasn't it? I think it was upwards of $4 billion, but that was private equity. That was a lot of different investors coming together in Clear Lake and putting the money and sort of pooling it, and Todd Bowley's the figurehead. So you could look at a situation where it's that. Other than that, you are talking about nation states, you are talking about the Gulf, the Middle East, which when we were going through the whole process last time, I think a lot of people were actually quite happy that it was Ratcliffe in the end, because they didn't want that association. They didn't want the sports washing element of it. They didn't want that accusation to be levelled at United. I was probably of that opinion myself as well, to be honest. But the thing is, you're swimming in a much shallower pool when you start to get these types of valuations, and so exactly where you'd find the buyer from, I think that is the question as well. And like I'm saying before, if you're paying if you have to pay Ratcliffe $33 a share, and that's taking the club upwards of 5.6 billion or whatever, but then you don't have to do it in 18 months' time, you can negotiate a better price. And so why would you pay now a premium if you could get something cheaper further down the line? I think that's a key question.
That is a good point. Is there a chance as well that Ratcliffe goes for this? That he's the one waiting in the wings to start buying more shares? Because obviously there were reports early on, when it was sort of him versus Sheikh Jassim really early, it was like they both want to buy the whole club. Whether how realistic that was and whether that was even true, they were sort of the reports we were hearing. And then all of a sudden, it was Jim's flexibility and Ineos's flexibility that almost allowed them to get their foot in the door in a way that, again, reportedly, Sheikh Jassim and the Qatari bid weren't willing to do. They wanted a full sale or nothing. Is there a case that Jim Ratcliffe is the one who ends up negotiating with himself or negotiating with the Glazers to get up to 51% of the shares or whatever? Is that a realistic possibility, do you think?
I think that would be an ideal thing from their perspective, and I think, like you say, he was considering that at the time, and it's not just reportedly. Like I'm saying, there's documents filed where he says he's offering this much for the full club. So I think we can take that as read that was he wanted to do that. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to remember whether he did or not, but maybe I'd have to check that. These documents are very dense and very.
Of course, we'll just say, potentially.
The ambition would be to do that, I think.
Yes.
The question is whether they'd have the money to do it. That has always been a huge point about Ineos. They've got their own financial issues in the wider part of the company. There's quite regular media reports about it in terms of the deals they've had with the All Blacks, having to renege on those because of different issues. I think there was a report last week saying they're not going to be paying out dividends anymore within their part of the company. They're not doing it at United. That was one of the conditions of them coming in, to stop the dividends that the Glazers were paying out before, but they're not doing that anymore. And that's generally a sign of a company that's not necessarily doing that financially well. You're paying out, if you can afford to pay out dividends, you're doing all right. Wasn't always the case with United, but whatever. Yeah. I think they would. Ideally, they would like to do it, and there's an argument to say that they're in the building already. I think the metaphor I've heard before is, Ratcliffe's is pregnant. Essentially, he's already there, right? And you can't be half pregnant or whatever. Once you're pregnant, you're pregnant.
As Ralph Rangnick will tell you.
Yeah, but money is the huge question. He might be the richest man in Britain. I think he still is, but whether he'd actually have the resources to get to that kind of level, it's a big question mark.
It's a tough one, isn't it? It's mad as well that the richest person in Britain, who I know we're not, top of the world in terms of rich, but, there's America, China, India, all these much more highly populated countries. But you'd think the richest person in Britain would probably have a bit more than 15 billion, wouldn't you? I know that's obviously so much money. But you'd think
there'd be 5 of them.
You'd think there'd be someone who had 70 billion in the UK. Billion. Who'd make some sort of tech somewhere, but we don't really do that stuff. All the big boys are either oil or tech, aren't they? A lot of them.
Yeah.
And obviously, we don't really do much of either of those two things.
I mean, our biggest resource is North Sea oil, and that's what he controls through the camp and through Grangemouth and things like that. So if that's the biggest asset, it's still not enough.
Yeah. Pretty mad. Let's move on to this Ratcliffe stuff with Amorim, because obviously a lot of the heat on Ruben Amorim has died down. Yeah. It's just, you just have to say that. I know the Brentford loss was a big one, but I feel as though the wins against Chelsea and Sunderland in the last 3, the way this conversation went last week or 2 weeks ago, the first thing on the agenda, regardless of whatever had gone viral on Twitter, would have been the future of Ruben Amorim. Yeah. That isn't the first thing on the lips of certainly the United fans I speak to and I see at the moment, even though it's maybe second or third on the agenda. There does seem to be a little bit of cooling towards imminent sort of sacking chat, I think largely down to this interview with Jim Ratcliffe. how surprised were you that he came out and said that? And do you think this 3-year thing, obviously if he loses 30 games in a row, he's not going to be here, but do you think Ratcliffe is genuine about that, or do you think it was more of a, right lads, this is a PR move, but back off for a minute?
To be honest, I wasn't that surprised by it, because I think we got the similar noises the week before after the Brentford game that Jim wanted to give Ruben Amorim the benefit of a whole season so that he could be judged on. Obviously, over 3 years is more than a full season. It would take us up to the end of next season, I think, right? Because he's got a 2.5-year deal. So he'd have been in the building for 2.5 years at that point. I think there's an extension on it as well, a +1. So it essentially takes you up to that period. I wasn't totally surprised, because I think there's so much, and we're used to this now as well. It feels like we flip. It feels like when there's a good result, people want to forget about it. But I am mentally preparing myself for Monday morning, and if there's 3-4-0 defeat at Anfield, for us to be having the same conversations that we're having the last few weeks. So, but what the external noise is one thing. What has been fairly consistent is that internally, Ineos still want to give him more time, and that hasn't changed. They're looking at the data, they're looking at the performances, they're seeing improvements, and that's the situation as it is. You always wonder how much is that going to be affected by results if they keep on getting bad results, but that's been the consistent message so far. So it's hard to, when he came out and said it, I wasn't hugely surprised. I was slightly surprised that he went as far as saying 3 years, but pushed into a corner, I thought he would say that. And to be fair, actually, I thought it wasn't like, you remember when he did those interviews in March and he was like, he's an outstanding young manager, he's going to be here for a very long time. It wasn't that, was it? At the same time, it wasn't. No. It was still, well, he needs to prove himself, and this season hasn't started well. So it wasn't like fully throated endorsement like it was 6 or 7 months ago, when, let's face it, the results weren't that much better anyway. So that was interesting, but that the key message and the key takeaway was he's got time wasn't a surprise to me. No.
Could he have done that interview and then got Amorim in a dark room and said, "Do you see what I did for you?" on camera. But better book your ideas up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You never know, but
maybe.
Obviously
motivational technique. Yeah,
as you both said, the thing is at United is we're always one game away from a crisis. So, as you've said, I think the whole fact of look at what you've just basically lauded. We're not speaking about the manager for a couple of weeks. That's how you know things aren't going well at the club, where it's like it's one game, everything's okay, he's here for 2 years, and it's one game, then it's a crisis again. That just shows you there's no sort of stability at the club, and there's not been enough stability with performances and results. I think that's just the reality of it, which is why I don't really do that. My mind doesn't sway on, because we beat Sunderland 2-0 at home and stuff like that. I try to look at the bigger picture, because I remember early on I was actually trying to be a little bit more patient in terms of there were iffy things, but I kept saying he's not had a summer, he's not had a pre-season, he's Europa League, which derails your ability to get training time on the pitch. He's not really had players that have been assigned to that have been signed for his system. So I was still a bit like, even though the season was really, really poor and his results were very, very poor going into the end of the season, I was still not thinking sack him, because I thought, you know what, let's get a window and then see within like the first 5 to 10 games whether things change, because then I know whether it's the full picture or not. And then I saw things that even started to be more worrying. So then I started to look at everything as a whole and be like, I'm not sure how far United's ceiling is under this current game model under Amorim. And so it's one of those where, so now I'm going to have to see more than just beating Sunderland at home and getting a result here and there. I'm going to have to see something sustainable, because that's the opposite of what we've seen under Amorim, and that is highlighted by that damning statistic of he's not won a game back to back in the league.
It's literally win, loss, win, loss, win, loss the last 5 games.
Yeah. So
or win.
But knee-jerk reactions of journalists are the problem here.
Is that what he said?
I can't. I can't talk today, to be fair.
No, I do think you're right. You have to look. We do have to look at the full picture.
Yeah.
And use that to guide the next sort of set of ideas and the next set of decisions. But it is weird that, I don't know, it's almost been so bad that you sort of think, well, eventually it'll get better, because you'd think even just a sort of relatively smiley kind of, I don't even know, like school teacher could get United winning more than 27% of their league games. Like just someone who goes, lads, what do you think we should do today? Right, okay, you want to play? Okay, yeah, you play that, right? You come sit next to me on the bench. You'll play. Go on then, enjoy yourselves. You think would win a similar number of games because there's a good quality team there, and just someone who watches a bit of football, letting them have a. Obviously, long term or even medium term, that would be a terrible thing to do. You need top level managers, but I genuinely don't think this squad could have a much more embarrassing win rate, no matter who the manager was. I think you could get a League Two manager to win at least the games that we've won so far. So part of me almost thinks, is something going to click at some point? Is he just this bad? Is the squad just this bad? I know you can't kind of, people say with this sort of little gambling thing of previous results don't infer future kind of winnings or whatever. And I'm almost doing the opposite. I'm almost implying that we've been so bad that we're going to start winning, which is absurd.
That's the fallacy in gambling, isn't it?
Exactly.
Like,
it's true. It's absurd, an absurd thing to say. But part of me does sort of think, well, surely he's not come to Man United and win 27% of your games bad. There has to be the thing that we're waiting for is going to happen at some point. But maybe it won't.
Eventually, you just
maybe
have to,
that's just it.
I think 50 games is enough to be able to see what it is. And also, you'd think things could be better because, let's be real here, the bar has never, ever, ever been lower for a Manchester United manager.
That's all true.
Under Amorim.
So, I guess there's a little bit of context in the last 3 months of last season in the league. I know what you're going to say. And I'm actually more on your side. I'm more towards your side.
That whole way through the league games, I don't know. I don't know how good that is. For me, I think as a football player and football managers, and if you're building a culture, it's always got to be a winning culture.
I'm not saying I agree with the decision, but I'm saying once you take that approach, then it does skew the results of the win percentage in the league or whatever we want to talk about on the points.
Because that 27% is the league, not.
Yeah. There is no. So wait, I still don't believe that Amorim and Manchester United went into the league games in the season kind of half tossing it off. Surely, I think that usually happens, in a sense, probably subconsciously with certain teams that are mid-table with nothing to play for, I guess. But I think if you're losing when your results have been okay for what club you are, I think if United have just been losing games week in week out, I don't think you really have the scope to go into the last few months and just go,
I get that. It just felt like there was a change of emphasis in those games, though, right? And the Thursday-Sunday schedule, it's rough. It's like very quick turnaround. I feel like I'm making excuses and apologising for him when I'm not really minded to. I think certainly if you want to make a case for it, it's not at the end of last season. It's probably at the beginning of this one. And those improvements that Ineos are saying are there. They're still very early. It's still like the Chelsea game, for example, right? They won brilliantly, but not brilliantly. It's brilliant that they won, but against 10 men for that first 45 minutes, that was the dominant period. And then once teams were level again, it was Chelsea were on top for the rest of the game, really, weren't they? You're still waiting for that. I think we've said it.
Win.
Well, we said it before, right? If you're trying to make an argument about Amorim, you're still talking about hypotheticals, aren't you? I think that is the key argument here, that you're still waiting to be proven right about him.
And luckily, the data's been favouring him this season. The data suggests in terms of expected goals and expected goals against and expected points.
Expected goals against ain't great, to be honest, but we can.
Yeah, I don't know. Exactly, that's the bit people don't talk about. Sort of kind of now framed it just to expected goals, where I think the data has said that we're better than what we've shown, but comes a point where there's only so much straws you can start grasping for. To be honest with you, the points aren't totaling up in the wins and results.
It's got to turn to wins, hasn't it? And I think it's got to turn into a coherent system that the players seem to understand and ideally enjoy, but certainly we'll start with understand, and that is resulting in better performances and better results than we had certainly at the end under Ten Hag. Let's start with that again, and then we can move on to a longer term thing. There's an interesting point though, isn't there, in all this, where people talk about so someone mentioned Tottenham in the comments, and how so even Spurs are in a process, just a much quicker and effective one. That's from Cantona's collar. And there's always the comparison manager. There was under Ten Hag, it was Ange Postecoglou to start with, where he came in and I think they won the first 6 games or something like that.
Yeah,
we're near the top of the league until November sort of time, and it was, well, why can't we do that when they did? And then we had this exceptional run after the World Cup, got to the Carabao Cup final, won it, got to the FA Cup final, lost it, but obviously in the end our season was very good. I think that's the correct time. No, that might be the season. No, I think that is the right time, man. Anyway, maybe it's the season after. Either way, there's always going to be a manager where you go, well, how come he's doing this? But Postecoglou isn't at Tottenham anymore. You know, we're looking at Thomas Frank at Tottenham now, and they look improved and slightly sort of more coherent. But the point of Man United isn't to try and get a manager that can have one good season, the way Postecoglou had at Tottenham, or the way, you know, Thomas Tuchel did at Chelsea, or what, obviously you take a Champions League, but it's to get up there and stay up there, because after Tuchel left, they were back down in 15th and 16th for a while, Chelsea. So the idea is we're kind of scrubbing things back and trying to build something that can have strong foundations at every level. Obviously, just never winning and never getting there isn't the point, but I do think it seems like we're trying to do things differently, and presumably by trying to do things differently, properly kind of set up and build up, it might be more difficult than it's ever been before in order to fully get a team together that works and makes sense over the long term. Is that something that you think that Ineos are thinking and are saying, or do you just think that, you know, they're just giving him time? For what reason? Why are they giving him time?
Well, I think they're giving him time, and one, respect for what you're saying, and that was Ratcliffe's argument last week. And to be fair, look at the history of the last 10 years of United. It's absolutely the case that they flip-flop from one manager to another, and whoever's come in has been expected to get results immediately. That's the nature of the club. And so what I struggle with is I don't think you're going to change the nature of the club. I don't think you're going to change the nature of the job in that respect. And so to go in the direction that they have gone in by getting a guy who is going to require time, who is going to play a completely different system, who's going to bring players in who, so he's going to have players who need to adapt to that, that perhaps isn't the way that is necessarily the fastest way to getting results. You're talking about Tottenham there and Thomas Frank. I know Spurs supporters who are saying they're playing terribly, but they've got wins so far, and for as long as they can, you know, win while playing terribly, they can figure it out along the way, and you get that benefit. As long as you've got the points, then you get given the rope enough to, you know, to be able to prove yourself. Amorim's never really had that. I think the honeymoon period was like 45 seconds long, right, when Rashford scored against Ipswich or whatever. He's never but he's never been there, has it?
No.
So yeah, and I think that's why they're saying it. I also think you got to let's get down to brass tacks here. He's their guy. He's their choice. With Ten Hag, that wasn't the case. It's much easier for them to say, sorry, right, we gave it a chance, but it's not working anymore. With Amorim, their reputation is on the line to an extent that it really wasn't with Ten Hag. I remember when they sacked him, I said, this is sort of the first blot on their copybook, because they had the opportunity to sack him in the summer, didn't do it, gave him a new contract, sort of messed up the process of getting to the point where they were going to replace him anyway. So that was a huge criticism of them. First blot on the copybook, whatever. This would be of different orders of magnitude, wouldn't it? Because this is a guy that you had the process in place, you hired the executive team, you got him, you then fired one of the executive team because he didn't have that much of a say in the actual decision. And what's happened over the last 10, 11 months since has been pretty disastrous if we're looking at results, if we're just basing it purely on results. So their reputation really is hugely on the line with it, and I think they would like to give it every opportunity to be successful. And I think that's quite, once you look at it from that perspective, it's actually quite understandable why he might be given more rope than Ten Hag or someone like that.
We've got a super chat from Gray Sheridan who says, do you guys like the formation? Are any of you locked in on a specific formation you want us to play? And is there a nagging feeling of just wanting a back four? I think there's a little safety blanket to a back four. Yeah. It's what we're used to. It's what we know. It's what wins.
I've got a piece coming out this week about the system, actually. Like, trying to figure out why.
And why Sesko shouldn't have been bought.
No. Didn't you hear that? Like, best signing of the summer, mate. That's what I said.
I've taken
the counterpoint. I've got something coming out this week on, like, why does he play it? Because the thing that he's been saying the past few weeks, and I think I brought this up on here before, he's been saying, like, you know, I'm not going to change. I might change, though. I might, like, wake up one day and just decide to change it. And so I'm like, what's this guy's thinking?
What's keeping you here, then? Why are you doing
what conditions need to be met in order for you to change the system? Like, is a 27% win ratio not enough for you to say, well, maybe I'll do things differently? So it's kind of looking into that, and I was speaking to people that played for him and worked with him at his first club in Casapia when he did change it, because he didn't always play it. He played a 4-4-2, then he changed to it. And the idea is to just try and get into his mind and figure out, why is this system so absolutely, has to be. He's so stubborn about it. I don't know if I've succeeded. You'll have to wait for the article.
Do you know when it's coming out yet, or is it a little bit?
I think it's on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
Yeah.
Very much looking forward to that.
It's definitely not like clickbait, rage bait, Benjamin Sesko.
We've got the link to your articles in the description as well, so go and check that out. Obviously, on Wednesday we'll check that out. I'm looking forward to that, because I do want someone to ask him and just say that. Well, basically that question. What? You've said that you're up for changing it at some point, maybe.
Yeah.
What would have to happen for you to change it?
I sort of asked him that back in February when I tried to write this article the first time.
Yeah.
And he said what he said consistently, and he said that this is the system. I am teaching the players the principles that I want them to play within this system, and once I feel like they can play those principles with their eyes closed, then we'll change system, then we'll move it around. And he said that, and like when he gave me the answer at the time, I was like, he's just fobbed me off. Like, he's not really answered the question, because I was asking him specifically about what he was doing at this first club that he was at. But then I read it back when I revisited this piece recently, and then I realised it's the same thing he's been saying consistently throughout. And to be fair to him, it made me realise he is like being consistent. He is saying the same thing.
And he's giving you an answer as well. He's telling you.
Yeah.
He's saying, and we've had this chat on the podcast. Whenever it was straight after even the Pope couldn't make me change. Because if you just read that bit, you go, well, what's the most inflexible man on earth? Yeah. His next sentence is, I will change, but I can't change now because of people are telling me to. Because what will the players think? Obviously paraphrasing there, but he talks about he's going to change at some point, but he needs the players to get it, and he can't just change because of this external pressure, because the players will, kill him.
It's that thing again. Said 100 times. People are just conflating system and formation. There's several things he could change while keeping the formation the same. Do you know what I mean? So, but I think it's just been like left reductively as almost go to a back four or go to a back three, and that's basically just the entirety of the argument for him changing and adjusting, which it isn't. So, and I don't know if he's perceiving it that way when he's being asked.
I think he seems to be. Yeah. I don't know this, but he seems to be getting a little bit annoyed with the questions, right? Like he's and that specifically as well. The point about people conflating the formation and the system. Yeah, I had to stop myself writing system in this. I was like formation, because it's just it's become natural. It's almost because he uses the word himself. It's just become that's the debate now.
Yep. We have a segment on the Paddock Podcast. I obviously you've been on loads, but have you done the Paddock Podcast before on a Monday?
Yeah, several times now. I'm a veteran.
He just does
it live.
So we get everyone else gets a pre-record, and we come on and just chuck you live and give you questions about an article. Of course, okay. So we'll do Wally of the week if we can. Each week we pick out someone who we think was a bit of a Wally this week. I'm gonna go first today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that the agents that said that Benjamin Sesko is going to be the worst signing of the summer.
Should I say The Athletic?
So I'm going to say me. I'm all the hate, all the abuse. No. Take it. I've got broad enough shoulders. If you're coming for The Athletic, come for me. Just come for me, guys. I can take it. I'm a big boy.
What a character! you just stood in front of the whole Athletic. Like some sort of superhero. Very impressive. Who's your Wally of the week, Ronnie?
Football organisers do you know there's another international break next month?
It's absurd. It's almost like we do this every year.
So so for me, it feels like they're more frequent these days.
Do you know, aren't they bringing in one where they're going to do it like over 6 weeks? I think I read. I should know if this is confirmed or not, but like they're doing it from the end of September into like middle of October. So it's the same amount of time, but you just bang it in one. Do you prefer that?
So it's almost like 6 week break from club football.
Yeah.
Probably might be too big of a great break.
Right.
Could they just split that into twos, like a 3 week and then a 3 week later on?
Still be crap though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I actually don't know if I'd prefer it if it's going to be 6 weeks, because then you've played 4 Premier League games and then the season stops for 6 weeks. That's literally like almost the summer.
Like
again.
The summer again.
It's like the summer holidays when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Bit long, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not up for that.
I would almost.
No, 6 weeks is too long.
Yeah, I agree. We've put your articles in the description. Very much looking forward to the one coming out on Wednesday. Thank you very much, Mark, for coming on and talking easily,
defending
smoothly,
my position,
your position, and I think it's a fair position to defend. I agree with you. I think it was a good article, and the fact that it's got people excited and talking, well, so be it. Thank you, Mark, for coming on. We've got one more super chat before we go. Coach Zach says, I coach a 3-4-3. It's not a system, it's a personnel issue. He tweaked the system by going long more to Sesko. At times we look like a 3-4-3, a 4-4-2, a 2-5-3, or a 4-3-3. It changes in game. Interesting, and I do agree with a lot of that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ronnie, as always. This has been the Paddock Podcast. We'll see you in a bit.